Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Mr. Tie-Dye, and today we're going to do a tiger striped shirt. I had a few different people ask me about it. I think even over on one of the live videos somebody was asking about tiger stripes. So anyway, what we're going to start with is a t-shirt that's been soaked in soda ash. It's been spun out so it's barely damp, and then as always I work on the inside of my t-shirt, so this is turned inside out. What that does is help cut down on the tiny little specks of dye. Some of the different colors like purple and red and black, they won't dissolve all the way, and there'll be little teeny tiny specks of dye, and they leave tiny spots on your t-shirts. So anyway, if you do work on the inside, then most of those spots, they're so minuscule that they only dye just the very tops of the fabric. So they'll be on the inside. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with the front of the t-shirt down flat, and what that's going to do is give me nicer lines, the tiger stripes on the front. And the way that I do tiger stripes is I just do kind of a loose pleated scrunch, but I'm doing longer lines and not doing like perfectly parallel even pleats here. I'm going to do kind of random, so I do just a little bit at an angle, not too much, because I want my tiger stripes to run across the t-shirt here or up and down the t-shirt. You can turn the shirt either way. But then I try to keep them kind of in just a little bit of a parallel line. I don't want them perfectly parallel, but I don't want them going completely diagonal. So I'll do just a little bit off the line here. So these ones, I guess I'll run these kind of up and down the t-shirt, and they'll be a little bit off. So I just kind of start out by pulling just a few creases up, and then you kind of scoot this over, and it just kind of gathers more creases. But then just reach in and kind of grab some more and kind of pull them into the fold here. So it's just a matter of kind of working with the creases, because the t-shirt we're going to dye orange, and then I'm going to put dye on, and I'm just going to try to coat just the tops of these creases, the folds. So that's the main thing you want to do, is just kind of get some nice fold lines up, because wherever you pull these lines up, these creases, that's what's going to be black. So that's what you're trying to visualize, is where you want your black lines at. So I just kind of keep pulling on the different parts of the t-shirt, bringing them in, doing them fairly parallel but not completely, just so that I add a little bit of variety. And I guess this is also one that if you did just put black on it, you could have it be zebra striped. So, but this one we're going to do tiger stripes. So I'm going to dye it orange, and then we'll go in with the black. So just keep creasing and folding your lines up, just kind of randomly. So you can see that this here's kind of just a bunched up mess here, but later on it'll look more like tiger stripes. So once I get those all kind of creased up there, I try to adjust some of my folds here just to give them more lines, and then just for ease of tying, what I'll do is just kind of fold my shirt then in half, because really the main thing that we want is these creases, and I've already got them pulled up. So now I'm going to just fold this shirt in half here, and then we're going to tie it up nice and tight with the kite string, or you can put rubber bands on here. This one I probably wouldn't do sinew on, because I don't want to tie it quite that tight. And then I'm pulling this kind of tight. Like I say, when we put the black on, we don't want it to soak all the way in. We want it to be just on the tops of the creases to make the lines. So I just kind of tie it up nice and tight. And then I'm going to adjust these folds a little bit more. So now I can use my cuticle pusher and get in here and separate some of these, just so that there's not folds that are laying over top. All of these here are laying over top of other creases here, so I'm just kind of opening that up. You can use this here to kind of tuck some of the creases deeper down inside, but I just want to get a good handle. And like I say, this here is the back of the tee. The front is going to be better because it was on the downward side while I was creasing this up. So I'm just adjusting the back a little bit, pulling some of the lower creases up, tucking some of the other ones down inside further. And the more time you spend doing this here, the better your lines are going to look. Now I'm going to look at the front a little bit here. And you can see my creases look a little better on the front here. So just make a few adjustments. And then I'm going to put some gloves on and we'll get some dye put on this. Okay, next up is my version of the Tiger Stripe. So remember, we did just kind of a loose scrunch fold on this, but had the tops of the lines. So I'm just kind of poking some of those down inside, because when we put the black on, we wanted the black just on the tops of these creases. So just to make sure that all of the creases are visible, I'm just tucking some of them down inside, because some of them do kind of lay over top of other creases here. So then for the Tiger Stripe, what I do is I just coat the whole thing top and bottom with orange, and then I'm going to set it aside. And then when it soaks in a little bit more, then I'll add the black on top. I'm going to use thick black dye though. So I want this to soak in some first. Okay, so this one I'm going to set it aside. I want these dyes to all soak in before I add the black dye on. And that's just going to help it not spread quite as much. If you put it on right now when this here top is still really wet from the dye, then the lines are going to spread, and I want to try to get like a nice hard edge on my lines. So we'll set this aside for 20 minutes or so, and then I'll come back to that. Okay, this here is set for about a half an hour now, and I can tell that it's still just a little bit damp here. What I'm going to do is just check down inside. I want to see what my dye saturation is like. I can see just a little bit of orange there, or a little bit of white down in the creases. So, and tigers usually have just a little bit of white on them. I'm going to go ahead and leave that. I like just a little bit, but if you don't want any white in your Tiger Stripes, then you could add a little bit more dye and let it sit again. But once again, you want it to be kind of fairly dry, not dry, but you don't want it to be extremely wet when you're putting the black on, or it's going to spread a lot. So what I have here is I got thick black dye, and I'm going to put that on one side. I usually just squirt it out into a little tray lid of some sort. And then I use a foam brush to just paint it on, because I just want to get just a little bit on the edges here. I don't want it to soak in too far, spread out too much. So I'll just paint it on with the thick black dye. You could also use the regular dye and paint it on. The lines would probably be a little bit thicker, but that way at least you wouldn't get too much. If you try squirting it on, then it might go in too far. So in fact, maybe I'll I'll do one side with the thick black dye and one side with the thin, and then we can see later what the results are, if we can tell the difference between the thick and the thin dye. And this is something, when I'm done with this thick black dye, whatever's left in the lid is just going to get washed away. I'm not going, even if I had a big puddle, I wouldn't try to pour it back into here, because this brush has touched the shirt, which has soda ash on it, and I don't want to get soda ash into this bottle, because the dye will slowly, it'll activate the dye minutely, but still over time it will kill that dye. So we're going to set that aside, and now I'm going to use some thin or regular black dye. This here hasn't been thickened, so I'll use just regular dye and do the same thing and just paint it on there. And this will probably give me just a little bit of variety in the thickness of my lines. And it definitely goes on faster. I'm trying to use just the thin dye here on this one, not the thick. Okay, and there's my Tiger Stripe t-shirt. So I'll let this batch for 48 hours and I'll have the result for you in about 2 seconds. Thank you for watching.